Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good evening, regardless of where you are in the world. Thank you for joining the Spiritist Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We're very happy. I am very happy to host our talk this morning with Alvaro Mordecai, who will be talking about the gospel safe path to find the joy of living. Let's all give Alvaro a very warm welcome. And hello, Alvaro, how are you?
Hello, Glaucio, my friend. I'm very happy to be here. I feel very special in my heart in this day. It's really a great pleasure to be with the United States Spiritist Federation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And for those who don't know you, so if you allow me, I'm going to talk a little bit about you. So you are a spiritist speaker, Alvar Mordecai. You're a spiritist speaker and who talks based on the studies of the Old Testament. You speak fluent Hebrew, among other languages. You studied and learned Jewish laws and customs through years of living in Jerusalem. You aim to combine the knowledge of the interpretation of the Bible's sacred texts through the wisdom of the Jewish people with the gospel of Jesus under the light of Spiritism. Alvaro Mordecai is also promoter and coordinator of group trips of the humanitarian organization Fraternity Without Borders. Alvaro, thank you very much. Thank you for for being us and take some time off your busy schedule to be with us and present us such an interesting topic.
Every time I come, it's a challenge for myself, but we do know that the Spiritism, the Gospels, that are trying all the time to take out each and every one of us from our comfort zone. So for me, it's a great challenge. It's a great pleasure. I try to be linked to connect with each and every one in the United States and all over the world who are working and trying to study and learn about Spiritism. So I'm very glad to be
Thank
here.
you. And also the best part is is that everybody will have an opportunity to send your questions during the presentation. All you got to do is just use the chat window, and Alvaro has reserved some time to address any comments or questions that you have after he concludes his presentation. Alvaro, again, thank you very much.
Okay, so let's start. First of all, to talk about such an important subject, gospel, a safe path to find the joy of living. How can we talk about that? We will choose a specific part of John's Gospels, chapter number 5, which is the healing at the pool, known by the healing at the pool. And we will talk about few versicles we will read, and we will take the most important words. We will try to understand the history. We will try to understand the archaeological sites, findings linked to these places. We will try to bring the Jewish tradition. We will try to translate the text to Hebrew, because although we know that all the text it's written on the Greek, those who wrote the text, they were thinking in Hebrew. So we can find many symbolical expressions, we can find many spiritual ways of achieving the spirit behind the letters. So we are going to make a lot of reflections, and we will try to bring some new points of view about this passage. And hopefully we will find the joy of living, the joy of our life, with the light of the Gospels, with the light of the Spiritism. So it starts like that. I will read, first of all, the first versicle. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. What can we ask about this versicle? First of all, let's understand, how do we understand the Jesus image on the Spiritism? How do we understand Jesus in the Spiritism? And for me, it's very important this, because I was born Jewish, and every morning I put the hands on my face and I say, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. I make this Hebrew prayer that says that God is eternal, God is one. And we had seen through the history of the Christianism that few parts of the Protestantism and the Catholicism used to see Jesus as a dogma, as being a God. And for me, being a monotheist, it's difficult to understand in this way. So in the Spiritism, we have the first question of the Book of Spirits. What is God? God is the supreme intelligence, the first cause of all things. Supreme intelligence, we do understand that God is the creator of heavens and earth. Heavens in a spiritual meaning the spiritual world and all the rules that are governing, that are ruling the spiritual world. And also earth, because we understand that's just the planet Earth, but all the universe, the material world that surrounds us. So altogether, we do understand that from his intelligence, God, we see the creation of the whole universe, the whole laws, rules that are ruling the universe, and God is the creator of all the spirits and all the material world. He's the first of all things. With this, we can understand that all the spirits are created simple and aware, meaning a lacking of all the knowledge. So to evolve, to make our journey to evolution, we need to reincarnate many times. What? To have moral evolution and to have our intellectual evolution. So we reincarnate many, many times, and with our own efforts and with our own free will, we will come to better positions each and every time we are making great efforts with our evolution. In this way, we understand that on the questions from 100 to 113 in the Spiritist book, we will find the spirit hierarchy. So spirits will be classified or are classified based on the degree of their advancement. So we do advance through our own efforts and through using our own free will. And as much as we grow, as much as we do our evolution, as much as we use our own efforts, we are reincarnating in better words. In primitive words, first of all, then we go to words of proofs and atonements, and then we are going to regenerate this word that we are living in few thousand years, and it will become a regenerated word, and so on. We will be reincarnating. But each and every time we incarnate and we have a special degree of evolution, also our mission in this world will be much bigger. It will cause influence in much more people. So there are spirits that are having very great and special missions with their own family, just with their family. There are spirits that it's a very special mission, one of the most special missions ever. If we remind, Jesus lived around 33 years, 30 was with his mission, with his family. So it's a very special mission. But sometimes we have missions with our city, with our state, with our country. And when we're going to achieve the highest level, when we'll be completely purified spirits, we will start a new journey, a journey as a Christic spirit. And when we achieve this journey, we are going to be governing, spiritually sane, countries, words, and we are going to be responsible for guiding whole global system with all the spirits that are in it. Emmanuel says that we have incarnated and on spiritual world around 20 billion spirits in planet Earth. So it means that Jesus is our spiritual governor of planet Earth. So he is the responsible, spiritually sane, for the redemption of 20 billion spirits. So when we look at that, we understand that Jesus is also a creature, not a God. But we do understand that his degree of evolution brings to each and every one of us in planet Earth important teachings, important way, and a responsibility that connect each and every one of us to Jesus. So this is roughly, what Spiritism understand about God. And this is completely according to what a Jewish person like me, that was raised on the monotheism, that was raised saying this prayer each and every morning and each and every night. So we understand that it's his message. It's worthwhile to listen to this. Second point, it's written like that. Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Why is just not written Jesus went to Jerusalem? Why it's went up? Because when we are saying this verse in Hebrew, we go up actually to Jerusalem. And if you are in United States and you are traveling to Israel, you're going to say in Hebrew that you are going up to Israel. If you're in Israel, you're going to go up to the Jerusalem city. And if you are in Jerusalem, you're going to go up to the mountain of the temple. It's not because when you move your body, you are actually having spiritual growth. You're connecting yourself to a higher moment of your life, spiritually saying. It's not about that, but it's the journey of the Spirit that finds in the Old Testament, in the first revelation, we will find the connections about Israel, Jerusalem, and the temple as being a symbolic way of understanding our spiritual growth. So to go up to Jerusalem means to go up to our spiritual evolution with going up into the spiritual growth to be connected with the higher elements of our soul. So we can see in the parable of Luke on the Good Samaritan, the verse that says, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Here we see the exactly opposite. Why? Because the man was in Jerusalem and he's going to Jericho. That here is the symbol, the symbolic way of understanding the connection with the human passions, with the material world. So this man, when he goes to Jericho, he will find a man that needed help. He was on the side of the road and he wouldn't help because he is in a spiritual way of feeding his unruled human passions. So this is why it's written, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. But also we can see that Jesus was going specifically on a Jewish festival. Why? Because we have 3 Jewish festivals that it's very important on the Roman Empire era. One, it's the Passover, the Pesach. The second one is Shavuot. It's when Jewish people celebrate the receiving of the Torah. And the third one is the Sukkot or Sukkos. Sukkot, it's when we celebrate the 40 years that the Jewish people went out from the slavery in the land of Egypt and went to the desert, and God took care of each and every one of us. And for the Roman Empire, we see the religion as a business. It means that The Roman Empire in that days was already a huge empire. They didn't want anymore to conquer more cities, to conquer other countries, let's say. What they wanted to leave the pax of the Roman Empire, the peace of Roman Empire. It means that they would hold their borders and they would try to live without rebellions inside their people. And about 100 years before, there was a governor, a ruler on the land of Israel that he tried to sabotage the Jewish tradition. So he said to the people that the Jewish people could not do their sacrifice on the temple. They could not make the circumcision. We couldn't do anything. We had to forget our tradition. And what happened? Then there was the Maccabees. They started a very huge revolution. And actually, these Maccabees, they could win the war against this important king that was ruling over the land of Israel. So the Romans, they understood that each and every time they would try to go to some people, to some civilization, and they would try to change their religion, sometimes it would work. But with the Jewish people, it never worked. It never worked. So they would say, okay, for us, you can live your tradition, you can live your religion, but you have to respect the Roman laws, okay? In this way, we live in peace. So you want to pilgrimage to Jerusalem for these 3 whole festivals, you can pilgrimage to Jerusalem. It's okay, but just in these 3 festivals, because the Roman law used to say that if you are a Roman citizen, you can travel freely on the Roman Empire. If you are not a Roman citizen, what happens? You have to ask a special permission to travel, just if it's not on these 3 Jewish festivals where people from all over the Roman Empire could freely pilgrimage, travel to Jerusalem. So here we understand why it's written also why Jesus was going up to Jerusalem in these special days, the Jewish festivals. Let's continue. Versicles number 2 and 3. So now there is in Jerusalem near the ship gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people use it to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. So let's understand a few points in these versicles. First of all, ship gate. What's the importance of this? And what's the spiritual meaning? And what's the connections with this? Why it's specifically talking about this gate? So the ship gate, it's the place where the Jewish people use it to bring the cattle for the sacrifice that would happen in the temple of Jerusalem. So when we read sacrifice, it doesn't sound very good 2,000 years after that. Of course, because we don't understand killing animals. But the main symbolical and spiritual meaning of sacrifice for the Judaism, it's also not linked to the sacrifice of animals. Korban in Hebrew, it's sacrifice. And it comes from the word karov. Karov means to get closer, to approach. To approach what? To approach God. So let's understand. In that days, you have very incredible high taxes for all the Roman Empire, especially in that days for the people who are living in the land of Israel. Why? Because you have a Roman aristocracy, you have a huge arm that also need to receive the payments from the Roman Empire. So this was enough to have a very, 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 very high taxes. But also you had Herodes, the king. He was like a puppet on strings for the Roman Empire. He was a king living in the land of Israel, but he was defending the interests of Rome. So you have also very big festivals in the Colosseum, where we know that more than 1 million people would go for the circus and the bread. And the Roman circus was giving food for weeks, months, for 1 million people. Who would pay for this bread? Who would pay for this food? Who would pay for this circus? So here we understand that we are facing already enough situations to have very high taxes, but this is not enough. We need higher taxes to understand, because we had tax collectors. What's the tax collectors used to do in the Roman Empire, in the land of Israel? They would make a deal with the Roman Empire. Let's say I have a city that needs to pay 100,000 on taxes. So the
Não vejo app para isso. Você...
Oh, my Siri is talking. And then you had to pay, let's say, a city 100,000 for taxes for the Roman Empire. The tax collector, he would pay in advance this money, and he would have the right of charging taxes from the people of Israel, and he would charge much, much, much more, 200,000, 300,000, as much as he wanted. And we have to understand that the agriculture in that days didn't have the same development of our days. We have to understand that the rain in the land of Israel, it's about 1 year, 1 month a year. So altogether, when you're saying about taking a sheep, let's say, for a sacrifice in the temple of Israel, in the temple of the Jerusalem city, you're taking something that could feed your family that's starving. Probably for 1 month, you could feed your family, and you will bring all of this to approach God. And we do understand that spiritually saying, we don't need to construct temples of concrete, because God is the creator of all the universe, all the material world. So how can we construct buildings for God? And we will expect that God will live inside these temples when he's the creator of the universe. The prophet Isaiah said to us. So what we understand? We understand that we can construct a temple, a place where God will habitate. Where? Inside our spirit, inside our hearts. And this is the altar of our temple, our heart, where we must bring sacrifice, the internal sacrifice of our selfishness, our aggressiveness, our uncontrolled passions that we have into our lives. So when we look the symbol and not the words literally saying, we can understand that till nowadays we need to cross the ship gate, and we need to go up to the temple of Jerusalem, and we need to bring the sacrifices in the altar of our spirits. So here we understand what's the meaning of this ship gate and why it's so important. Because it's through this that we will find the redemption of our souls. With our own efforts, with multiple reincarnations, with the journey that we must do inside our spirit when we are living in this material world. So point number 2, there's a pool. And immediately when we see a pool in the Old Testament, we can think, that's a Jewish pool. It's a mikveh. What's a mikveh? It's a ritual pool where Jewish people go in to purify your spirit. And it comes, this tradition, from the book of Genesis, when we do find the passage of Noah, and the world was full of evil. And God wanted to purify the world from that evil. So what happens, symbolically saying, 40 days of raining, and the world was flooded with water. Just the family of Noah was saved from this. We do understand that this is all symbolical way of understanding a parable of the Old Testament. But we understand that the most important thing here is to understand that when we want to purify our spirits and we are in the spiritual world, what do we ask? I want to reincarnate in planet Earth. Why? Because I have some pain in my consciousness. I have some debts with my consciousness. I have some debts with the law of God. So the spirit say, okay, you want to reincarnate? You go to planet Earth. You're going to incarnate once again. For what? For purifying your spirit. So we also go to a pool, small pool, the womb of our mother. And as it was written in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, that there was rain for 40 days and 40 nights, we will find ourselves till 40 weeks in the womb of our mothers. And if we are gonna look for the excavations all around the Temple of Jerusalem, all over the world where there's Jewish communities, you will find these pools for the Jewish people, archaeologically saying, and even nowadays. Why? Because when we reincarnated, when our spirit is submerged in water, we will try to find this purification. When we are born in a body that has around 75 to 80% the composition of it in water. So our spirit, for the purification, is doing the symbolic way of understanding this passage of the Jewish people in the Old Testament, and also the baptism, that is a Christian tradition. It comes from the same specifically point of the Old Testament. Why? Because John the Baptist, he used it to go to a pool, Jordan River, that has a natural source of water, and this source of water he would bring in his people and say, okay, now you should renovate your spirit through this Jewish ritual that will give birth for a Christian tradition. But what we are finding here, it's not specifically a Jewish pool, but the archaeological findings will say that actually we are in a Greek temple, a Roman temple. It's the Asclepius temple. Asclepius, he's the god with minor g of medicine in the Greek tradition that the Roman Empire used to use this tradition in their cultural system. So there were 3 temples for the Asclepius god with minor g. First of this, the most important one, it's in the CANAIS island, in about 4 kilometers nowadays from the Turkey coast, and it's in Aegean Sea. It's where Hippocrates learned medicine. He studied medicine. The father of the medicine, he learned in this hospital, that it's a temple for Asclepius. There's another one that it's located nowadays in Turkey country, in the city of Pergamon. And in the city of Pergamon, it's one of the 7 early Christian communities that John the Evangelist founded in that day. 7 communities of the Apocalypse. And he founded this in one of the 7 communities in the city of Pergamon, where we have the second most important temple for Asclepius. But this temple, I have been there. It's very interesting. You have the pools, you have other things. You have the theater, but this is a temple that it was reserved specifically for those who have mental diseases, not a regular hospital, but we will find here a hospital just for mental disease. And the third most important temple of Asclepius is the temple that is just sitting side by side, very nearby, a few hundred meters from the temple of Jerusalem, near the sheep gate. So this is the third temple. And why is this a big issue? Because we were talking about the Jewish tradition and how the Jewish people are very, very, very linked, connected. And actually, the Jewish people live the traditions. How can you have a temple of idolatry just very nearby in Jerusalem? Just very nearby the temple in that days. So we had to find in that days in the society some people that use it to take care of the Roman Empire interests. And they were the Sadducees. We had a very important part of the Jewish society that they were the priests that used it to work in the Temple of Jerusalem. But not all the priests were really priests, according to the Old Testament. But a part of them, they were the Sadducees. They bought from the Roman Empire the right of being priests in the Temple of Jerusalem. But also, once again, we are seeing puppets on strings, that they were taking care of the Roman tradition, of the Roman Empire, of the interest of the Roman Empire inside the people and the land of Israel. Why? Because they could understand the Jewish tradition, but they were working for the Roman Empire, being priests in the Temple of Jerusalem. So every time the Jewish people wanted to do a rebellion against, let's say, the Roman Empire, so the Sadducees, okay, no, let's not do it, because actually they were preserving Roman interests. But they had the ability of understanding the Judaism, the laws of the Torah, and they would manipulate these laws for not making big problems in that days, because if there were a revolution, it would cost their heads. So this is the historical way of understanding, but what we want in this passage is to find the spiritual meaning of that moment. So there's a book, The Messengers. It's the second book of the Life in the Spirit World, the collection of books from André Luiz. And we will find something very interesting here. We will find a certain number of experiences from spirits who incarnated in planet Earth. And they had a pre-planned journey to achieve in this world. They would have very much in their lives, in their consciousness, clear the way that they had to go, how they should behave, exactly like we live. We live in the same exactly specific situation. We had a pre-planned moment before incarnating in this world, and then we make all this plan and said, okay, now I go to planet Earth and I will live this, I will do that, I will do exactly what I need to be in the whole Jerusalem of our spirits, and I will go to the altar of my heart, and I will do all the sacrifices for my human passions, because I want to have spiritual growth, because I want to find the peace in my consciousness. But sometimes we come to this planet and the human passions are stronger than our will of spiritual growth. So this book will say exactly about that. That we do have exactly in the most important place of our soul, the altar for our sacrifices. But very nearby, just few steps, just crossing the wall, the ship gate, we will have there a temple of idolatry. And we have to choose how we do, where we go, when we are trying to achieve actually in this world the spiritual goal, growth, the elevation of our spirits. So there are 5 cases that we are going to talk about in this book. First case is the case of Octavius. He had spiritual debts with 6 spirits, and he was in the spiritual world, and he had so much pain in his consciousness. He said, I want to reincarnate, and I will adopt these 6 kids as my own sons and daughters. I will love them. I will give instructions to them. I will sacrifice myself to them. And I will live a whole life to achieve the temple of my Jerusalem, the altar of my heart. And I will give all my sacrifice to achieve this spiritual growth as the pre-planned plan was done. So when he was in planet Earth, he actually married a very complicated woman. She was completely spiritually disturbed. And he became a compulsive for sex, unruly sex. He became a compulsive for alcohol. And he, in this journey, he contracted syphilis. And when he contracted this disease, he would see these kids passing through his lives, but he was in the temple of idolatry. He could not bring the sacrifice that he needed to live into his life. So he's back after he passed away to the spiritual world with so much pain in his consciousness. And he's explaining what he did wrong for us to understand what we have to do in this life. Second case, Acelino. He was a medium. He found in his mediumship a very beautiful way to learn the Gospels, the love in the universal way of understanding it. He found in the mediumship a very grateful way of serving God and for spiritual growth. But suddenly he would discover that he could make money with his mediumship. And he forgot what it's written in the Gospels. Give for free what has been received graciously. So he had to use his mediumship to serve others, to educate his spirit, to understand the spiritual life, to be in contact with the spiritual world, to bring message, to help spirits, and to help everybody that were around him. This was what it was written in his pre-planned journey through this reincarnation. But once again, it would cost him the sacrifice in the altar of his heart, of his unruled passions. And he was not ready for that. So he goes to the temple of idolatry. Case number 3, the case of Joel. And he had a very great mediumistic capacity. He used to produce great phenomena. And he forgot the instructions that were given by Allan Kardec. He started using all the mediumistic phenomena to convince people about the Spiritism. And he forgot that the most important way of convincing people about the Spiritism and the Gospels is the renovation of our souls. This is the true way that we can convince people when we become much special person, when we understand that we must forgive, when we understand the value of charity for those around us, when we understand the value of serving according to the laws of God. And by this way, he just stood for the phenomena in the mediumistic presentations, and he lost the possibility of sacrificing his unruled Roman passions that gave so much pain into his consciousness. But once again, he was in this world and he couldn't go for the spiritual temple of his heart. He went to the temple of idolatry just side by side, very nearby. And the fifth and last case, Mr. Monteiro. He had a very good will of working, and he used it to understand about the Gospels. And he would recommend renovation in the spirit for everybody. He would renovate, he would recommend charity and all the principles of the Gospels. But he didn't apply this for his life. So he had everything to go to the altar of his heart once again and to make all the sacrifices that were necessary for him. But he went to the temple of idolatry that it's very nearby. So let's read the last verses for today, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 9. And let's go for the last part. So the gospel say like this: one who had been an invalid for 38 years, when Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool. When the water is stirred, while I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead on me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." And at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat, and he walked. First of all, let's understand something. What is this water that used to stir? And these angels that they were moving their wings and it would move the water. How can we understand that? So when we go for the archaeological findings, we will see that there are pipelines that works with gravity that use it to bring clean and new water for that pool. And let's imagine thousands and thousands and thousands of sick people going inside the water with so much disease, that water would become very dirty. So people could not go in each and every time they wanted. They have to wait for the renovation of the water. So when the pipelines are open and new water would come, we would see this stirring water. And people would say, now the angels of God came. And now I have to go in very fast because very quickly the water would be very, very dirty. So in this way, we understand that actually it's not angels of God, but it's the structure, the construction that was made in a way that those who were inside this idolatry temple, they would be waiting for the renovation of this water. But here it's interesting because we read there was someone invalid for 38 years waiting. And this is the biggest point for us today. He was waiting for someone to solve his problem. And sometimes we are waiting for people to heal us. Sometimes we are waiting for people to bring us happiness, to bring us the joy of life. Sometimes we are just paralyzed waiting, when actually being paralyzed of our body, being blind of our eyes, this is not excuses. We should listen to the voice of Jesus that it's repeating for us. Get up, stand up, pick up your mat and walk in the direction of the renovation of your soul. in the direction of the Gospels. And today, to talk about that, I will talk a very special spirit. He's a great friend in the spiritual world. And we have been talking about him almost all the places we have been. And we are talking about him in these days much and much more. He was born in 1939, the 1st of November. His name is Jerônimo Mendonça. And he was born in the city of Ituiutaba, in the state of Minas Gerais, in Brazil. And Jerônimo Mendonça, he passed away in 1989. And when he was born, he was a young person, like each and every one of us. He used to like sports. He used to have the dreams of having girlfriends, of having a family. He had a broadcaster voice. Every time he comes, I say, "Whoa, you have such a beautiful voice." And he says, "Your voice is terrible." He's a very fun spirit in the spiritual world. He's every time living with the joy and the happiness in his spiritual life and also in this life. And he used to walk up in the morning, and he used to beat in his chest in front of the mirror and say, "I am Tarzan, the king of the jungle," with so much dreams to achieve in his lives. And when he was young, he was a Protestant. And he is so grateful to learn so much great experience about God, about the Bible, and he learned it with the Protestantism. But there were some questions that he couldn't find the answers when he was young in the Protestantism. And he had a neighbor that he was a Spiritist. And this Spiritist neighbor started asking him how he was, started answering the question that he has, and he became a Spiritist because he found so much answers that he couldn't find anywhere. And he started to study Spiritism, and once there was a special medium, he used to go to different cities to give lectures, and this medium went to the city of Ituiutaba, and he went for a lecture. So he's in the middle of the lecture, and then he stops talking. He gets very emotional. His voice changes a little bit. His face is changing a little bit. And he says in the middle of the lecture, in front of hundreds of people, "Tarzan, you must hold on the vine of faith, because you will cross the jungle of pain." Nobody understood what was that, but Jerônimo Mendonça understood, because he used it to remind every morning that he was the Tarzan in his young dream. And Jerônimo Mendonça, he was very, very poor. He had 10 brothers and sisters. And in that days, what was the most important clothes? It was the most fashion clothes. It was the white suit with black shoes. But he couldn't even afford for a regular shoes. Imagine a white suit. But he had a friend that wanted to give him a gift. He was a tailor, and he saw a white suit for him, and he bought a black shoe, and he gave him as a gift. And there was a movie in that day in the city, Gone with the Wind, 3.5 hours of movie, smaller than my lecture today. I'm joking. And he went to the movies to see It's Gone with the Wind. But when he arrives with his white suit, with his black shoes, when he arrived, there was no place to sit. So he had to stand for 3.5 hours. And when the movie was over, he was completely freezed. He had so much pain in his legs, and he couldn't move his legs. He had so much pain in that moment that his friends had to take him home because he couldn't even walk. So he was now understanding that he had rheumatoid arthritis, that it's a disease that didn't have any way of healing in that days. So he became completely paralyzed for decades. He became blind of both of his eyes. He had so much pain in his chest that he had to put a sandbag on his chest. And now we will ask you that you are helping me in this moment, if you please could find in the internet, I don't know if it's possible, some picture of him. Please, if you can find, it would be nice probably to put in the end, who is this Geronimo Mendonça? And here we will see that he had to put this pillow of sand with 20 kilo on his chest to make lighter all the pain that he was feeling. And he had the sensation, the feeling that his face was burning with fire. So he had to put 2 ventilators in front of his face just to make his life a little bit better. So even like this, he could find the joy of living. And he could find, he was a very, very, and he's a very, very happy spirit. His mother used to say, you know, you are my only paralyzed son, but you are the only one that is never at home, never stays at home, because he founded 2 spirit centers. He constructed a nursery daycare for kids because kids were starving around his city, and he dictated 6 books, and he even recorded a long play. And he was never at home, and he was always a very happy person, and he found the joy of living by serving and working in the charity. He used to have a van that it was written, without charity there's no salvation. And people say that each and every place he would go, in the poorest places of the city of Utaba, he was there with his orthopedic bed, because he couldn't stay in a wheelchair. He had to stay in orthopedic bed. And he was in this mat for so long, but always helping people. And there are a few funny stories about him. He had a brother that his name was People, his nickname was People. And once they were in the way to Uberaba, where he used to visit Chico Xavier every 15 days. And his brother was speeding, and he said, you know, People, I feel that you are speeding a little bit, but I want to make myself clear, and I want you to understand that I don't want to visit Uberaba to meet Chico Xavier, to meet Emmanuel, the mentor, spiritual guide of Chico Xavier. I want to meet Chico Xavier in person. He meant, I don't want to disincarnate because you're speeding too much. And people used to see him all around the places, and they didn't know who was Chico Xavier, who was Geronimo Mendonça. And people would come to him and said, are you Chico Xavier? And he said, no, I'm just a frog. And Chico Xavier is a big star on my lagoon. And when he wanted to make the constructions of this daycare nursery for babies and kids that were starving in his city, he didn't have the money for that. And he went to Chico Xavier and he said, you know, Chico Xavier, I want to construct a nursery daycare for babies. And the answer of Chico Xavier, it was, you know, you and the singer, the famous singer, Roberto Carlos, you are in the same vibration. You are linked, connected to your thoughts. And he didn't understand about that. What Chico Xavier wanted to say. And he was in his city, Tuiutaba, and he said to his brother, you know, let's pick up some friends and let's go to the Rio de Janeiro city. 18 hours drive in an orthopedic bed, in a mat. And he went to the city of Rio de Janeiro. When he arrives the show, and they stopped at that fund written, without charity there's no salvation, and they started taking out this big bed, orthopedic bed. Everybody started looking, who's that, what's that? And the manager of the line comes to them and say, when he sees it, Geronimo Mendonça, what you're doing here? Said, do you know me? Yeah, I know you. I am spiritist. I go to Uberaba to visit Chico Xavier, and I have seen you a few times there. I came to the show of Roberto Carlos. He said, okay, do you have tickets? No, I don't have. And then he said, okay, I will help you. I'll talk to Roberto Carlos. And Roberto Carlos allowed them to go in and to stay in the best position of the show. Although he was blind, he couldn't see the show. He couldn't listen in the end of the show. Roberto Carlos, talked to him. He explained what he needed, and he gave him a check of 1 million, the money of Brazil in that days. And it was so much money that he could make the construction of the nursery baby care. He could help so many entities. He could help so many spiritist centers that have problems with money in that days. And Geronimo Mendonça found the joy of his life by doing thousands or hundreds of lectures in 5 different states, and he was all the time traveling and going around and helping people. And he told that once he was in his city, Tuiutaba, and there was a young girl that she was not polite, and she used it to say, well, every place I go, I found, she used it to say in a not polite way, this cripple everywhere I go. And once he answered her, of course, you don't stay at your home. That's why you meet me in every place I go. So Geronimo Mendonça, he was very, very, very special spirit. He was paralyzed of his legs, his hands, his eyes, but he was not paralyzed in his spirit. Once he was very sick, and the doctors told him that he's going to pass away in a few days. So he said he wanted to go to Chico Xavier. He comes to Chico Xavier, and when he goes to Chico, Chico says, how are you, Geronimo? I'm fine. How are you, Geronimo? I'm fine. Second time. Third time, how are you, Geronimo? I'm not fine. I'm dying. I have just few days of life. My heart hangs by a thread. And Chico Xavier told to him, you're so lucky that your heart hangs by a thread. Because there are threads of cotton, there are threads of nylon, there are threads of steel. There are wires of cotton, steel, and whatever. And what makes the threads of life stronger and thicker? It's the hard work in the Gospels. It's the sacrifice you make in the altar of your heart. And Geronimo Mendonça looked at Chico. Chico told him, you look like a rose, because it was full of blood. His sheets and blankets that he were wearing on the orthopedic bed. You need to be taken care, because you look like a rose, and a rose can lose his petals. He helped Geronimo Mendonça. And when he was feeling better in that day, because Chico Xavier, he had the mediumistic capacity of curing people. And he was much better, and he said, now I can rest a little bit. And Chico Xavier told him, now you explain the Gospels of the night in our meeting in the Spiritist Center. And Geronimo Mendonça asked him, why I became so much worse in these days? He said, you know why? Because you felt pity of yourself. And when you felt pity about what people were telling about you, that you are paralyzed, that you had a poor life, you believed in that. And you couldn't see that the needs of the sacrifice of your human passions, and you have all the possibilities of serving God even when you were paralyzed and blind from your whole body. Because you had your voice, he had his thoughts, he had the possibility of standing up before Jesus in his spirit, although for decades he couldn't stand up into his life. So going now for the end of our talking, of our lecture, we see in the next versicles that the guy that was sitting in the pool of Bethesda, and he stood up for his life, he was seen in the temple of Jerusalem. And it's the meaning of the regeneration of his spirit. And we understand that although we have very strong pain into our lives, although we have a lot of problems, although we can be paralyzed of our body, although we can be blind, although we can be sick, although we can stand up, we can get up and go for the gospel of Jesus, and we can find the joy of living into our lives through serving others, to understanding the most deeper way the gospels, that it's loving others, loving our neighbors like we love ourselves, by doing the charity as a way of going to the altar of our hearts and working hard for the treats of that holds our life, to be thicker and to be every day stronger, although we will find pain, although we will have a lot of difficulties into our lives, but the will and the choice of getting up, finding the necessary help with the gospels, with medicine, with doctors, and especially today's with the spiritism. And when we will stand up in front of Jesus, and we will understand that to achieve the altar of our hearts, as each and every one of us pre-planned in the spiritual world, we will ask us great sacrifice, that we will bring the peace with our consciousness, that we will bring the most important achievement of our lives, the conquering of the redemption of our spirits, through everyday efforts to construct into our word, into our spirit, a way to achieve the altar of our hearts and to achieve the joy of living in the Gospels. So here we finish our exposition, and if we can find, I don't know if it was possible, sorry, I didn't told you about the picture of Geronimo Mendonça before.
We did share. We did share the picture, Alvaro, by the way. It's right there.
Oh, yeah. He's a great friend of each and every one of us. He's a very fun spirit. When I talk about him, I say Geronimo Mendonça was a guy that never stood paralyzed when he was incarnated and paralyzed in his body. But he was moving all around and traveling all Brazil to make speeches. And I say to people, you can make your praise and you can ask Geronimo Mendonça for the help, because nowadays he stand up, and he's a very special spirit. And he comes to me sometimes and say, there comes you once again, giving me all this work, because he's very funny with people around, saying that they can make praise for me. And before I was preparing this lecture, he said, "Just you. It's for you. It's your will to bring me, a paralyzed man, in this world, to your lecture in United States of America." This is something that nowadays it's easier. And he was very funny when he was talking to me. So this spirit is a great spirit that sometimes comes to us, and we wanted to talk about him for the United States Spiritist Federation.
That was very interesting. Thank you for sharing the all the insights, about the gate of sacrifice versus the gate and the temple of sacrifice versus the temple of idolatry, and bringing in, of course, Geronimo Mendonça's story. That was very, again, that just tied up so greatly with your lecture. Before we move on over to our Q&A, so I have a few announcements to make. So stay tuned. Right after the announcements, then we'll move on to the Q&A. So first of all, there is a podcast-like series. It's called Psychology and Spirituality: A Bridge to a Better Life, and it's based on the works by Joanna De Angelis. There's a new episode every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Some of you were tuning in at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now there has been a change in time. So basically, it is a psychology and spirituality. Those are psychology and spirituality weekly talks, and again, based on the works by Joanna De Angelis, and they offer a space to confront, compare, correlate, and expand spirituality concepts from a psychological lens, bringing insights, actionable tips, and real-world advice to help you lead a better life. So you can subscribe to the USSF YouTube channel, and now also that series is available on Spotify as well. So my understanding is that the first 7 lectures are on Spotify already. So there's another way for you to access that content. The U.S. Spiritist Federation has also launched a new Spiritist app. It's called Be My Hope, and is available now for download either on the Apple Store, or on Google Play. It's a brand new app that offers uplifting comfort in a collection of videos, daily messages, and audio materials, and you can download it now. And and lastly, you're gonna see on the screen there is a QR code. Just as a reminder, you have a chance to help the U.S. Spiritist Federation produce more publications and promote Spiritism to everyone, and you can help using the QR code that is on the screen with your donation. All right, Alvaro, let's start addressing the comments and questions from the audience. And of course, and for those of you who have not submitted your questions or comments, there's still time. Here's the first one from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. Alvaro, can you explain the main differences between the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Zealots in the time of Jesus?
Yes, of course. The Pharisees, they were the ones that nowadays we could see, let's say, if we were making a parallel, as the Orthodox Jews, because they were studying very deeply the Torah, and they have all the knowledge of the discussions, of the rules, of the laws, of the biblical tradition, and these links between the text and the understanding of all of this. It was made by the Pharisees that had their centers of studies that nowadays we call yeshivot or yeshiva. That's its Jewish centers of studying Torah and the Old Testament. Nowadays, the Talmud. In that days, we didn't have the Talmud. So this is the Pharisees. The Sadducees, they were the priests that bought the places in the Temple of Jerusalem. And the Sadducees, they were followers of Tzadok, says the Talmud. Tzadok was a guy that he was the only one in the Judaism in that days that wouldn't believe in reincarnation, because he wanted for his followers to live their life receiving whatever good they would do through the word in financial response, so they could sell whatever good they wanted to do. So this is the Sadducees. They were considered, I don't know the specifically word, but they were considered a part of the Judaism, and they are not very well accepted for the Pharisees. And after this moment, when they were priests, they had to be accepted because they have political power. But after that, the Sadducees, they were over, and the Pharisees they didn't accept exactly the Sadducees. The Zealots, how you say zealots?
Zealots.
What's zealots? The zealots, the zealots, the pronunciation. The zealots, they are the ones that they were inspired in the Maccabees, and they wanted to create a revolution where they would murder the Roman soldiers and the Roman authorities, and even the tax collectors, because the tax collectors, they were working for the Roman Empire. So when we see the passage that talks about, how you say Zacchaeus?
I actually forgot. Everyone was honest, but but Zacchaeus, tax collector, famous tax collector.
Zacchaeus.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So when we see Zacchaeus running behind a bunch of people, why he's doing that? Because he was afraid of being killed by a zealot. It's not actually because there's a specific social meaning. So he was a tax collector. So the zealots used it to murder. They wanted to actually do a revolution against the Roman Empire. But there's another group of people here, actually more two groups, more few, but I will just talk about one of them. The Ameharites, the people of the land, that they were the ones that were working in agriculture in the Galilee, which Jesus was around there, which we see the 12 apostles. They were mainly, not the 12, but mainly Ameharites. They were mainly people from the land, that they were very simple. They were living the Judaism. They were feeling, they had the knowledge of the regular days using of each and every day of the Judaism, but they had not the knowledge. They didn't have the knowledge of the Pharisees.
Yeah. By the way, it's Zacchaeus.
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 Okay.
All right. Alvaro, why did Paul write in the epistles to the Romans that faith alone would bring salvation?
Because faith will bring, but we have to understand what it's faith in Judaism. And where we find this? We find in the second book of the Torah, Exodus book. How? You know, Moses was going with the people out from Egypt, and they achieved the place that they found in front of them. What? The Red Sea. And behind them, the army of the Pharaoh. And they were in position that sometimes we feel like that into our lives. That when you look, you just see a sea that you have to cross. What do you do? And when you look behind, it's all your past coming over to you. What can you do? What would you do? And then the Midrash, the Jewish tradition, says that the people of Israel, they started giving their opinion. Okay, let's go back and we're gonna go back to Egypt and let's be slaves once again. And no, we cannot do that. Why? Because you cannot give up to your past, because you are not seeing this moment where you achieve with your renovation of your spirit. The second group say, no, let's make war, let's fight. It's also not an option, said Moses. Why? Because it's not through the fight that we find with our hands, with guns, that we will find the solutions of our problems in life. It's through diplomacy, It's through emotional care and education of our emotions. Not about fighting. Yes, we have to fight very hard inside our spirits. And he said, no, this is not the way. And some people said, okay, let's have faith and pray. He said, no, faith in praying, it's not a solution. Because just praying and just faith, it's not a solution. He said, okay, a guy called Nashon Ben Aminadav, he started going with his group. And he was walking into the water and he was praying and he had faith, but also he worked hard for his faith. And then the water, when the water was just like in his nose, the Red Sea started opening. And we understand that the faith, emunah, is not just believing in the Judaism and for Moses and for the prophets. The faith is the hard working for the Gospels, is the hard working for the sacrifice of our hearts. And without charity, there's no salvation. Because the first Jew of the word, Avraham Avinu, Abraham, he taught two very specifically teachings that we have this till nowadays. One, that the transmission of our moral and of our teachings should be done into our family. And the second one, when he makes a prayer in a sunny day with 99 years old, just after circumcising himself, and he makes a prayer in front of his tent, his home in the desert, and his praying is that even one day he couldn't stay without doing charity for others. When he opened his eyes, he will see 3 people pilgrimaging, and he would receive these people into his tent in his house, and he would sacrifice a cattle for them, 3 actually, and he would also wash their feet, and he would show to humanity that without charity there's no salvation and there's no faith. The faith that Paul, the apostle, wanted to tell us is the same thing of the circumcision of Abraham, because in the same letter he says, circumcise, make the circumcision into your heart, into your spirit, not into the flesh and blood, but into your inner heart. And then you live with a pact with God. And then we see the life of Paul the Apostle that walked for 14,000 kilometers, living his faith, working hard, doing charity, and explaining the word about how important is the message of the first revelation, of the second revelation, of the Judaism, of the Gospels, and explaining the word that faith comes with hard working.
Thank you for that explanation. It was very clear. We have the last question here. It's kind of long, so please bear with me. Did the old Judaic prophecies actually predict that Jesus will be wrongly accused and executed, or was that a concept incorrectly added by Christianity later on? The second part, what is the concept of the Messiah nowadays in Judaism? Has it changed since the time of Jesus?
It's interesting to understand because we have 2 messiahs in the Judaism, in the Talmud. One for the word and one for the spirit. Exactly like we have one for the word that comes into this world and will be treated like we treat each and every one of us. Still, even nowadays, we are treating ourselves mainly in human society through how we treated Jesus. why he was crucified. Because let's understand, we said that the Sadducees had a very important paper. They have a very important function. Role, function. How they had this very important function and role. Because they were puppets on the throne. They were taking care of the Roman interests. So if there would start a rebellion, who would be blamed? The Sadducees, first of all. And they would be dead, for sure, 100% sure. So when they see someone talking about a kingdom, you cannot talk about the kingdom inside the Roman Empire. The only kingdom you can talk, it's the Roman Empire kingdom. But he was talking about the heavens kingdom, the spiritual kingdom. And he was explaining about the spiritual kingdom. But how many people had said, I am the Messiah in that days? Paul the Apostle will write it in the Acts about that. When we find many writings of this. And when he started doing this, the Roman Empire would look to him and say, okay, we have a rebel. And the Sadducees, instead of explaining, instead of trying to understand, he said, okay, let's follow the Roman law, because Jesus was crucified according to the Roman law. There is no crucifixion in the Jewish law. The Roman Empire wanted to crucify him. And the Sadducees, they were far from living the Judaism, Torah. We talked about that in few minutes ago. So the first Messiah, says the Talmud, Ben Yosef, that it's actually his father. Yosef, it's the father of Jesus. And in the Talmud is the same name. He would be treated in this word like it's ruled for us. But there's a second one that comes on spirit. And Jesus gave this promise to us. And this is the Messiah in spirit. That it's also in the Old Testament, in the passage of Noah. But we have to make a deeper explanation, because when it's written that the purification of the water, of the word, would come with 40 days of raining, it's not just raining. It says that also water from the ground. So one Messiah would come on the ground, and the other one from the heaven in the spiritual meaning of spiritual word. So where is this Messiah? It's with us right now in this moment. And its name is Spiritism. When we understand the rules of the spiritual world, and we understand the mysteries that had been covered for thousands of years, and nowadays we can understand. So the concept of the Judaism, it's very, very close to what we understand. But sometimes we look to the words and we don't look to the spirit behind the letter. So what we do understand is that the Messiah will change the world through his teachings. But what would be of the best teacher in the world if he doesn't have students that can listen to him, that can look to his lessons, and that they will say, or we will say, to this professor, to this teacher, okay, I want to follow your teachings. I want to proclaim the kingdom of heaven into my heart. And through this, we need faith. And faith is hard working for constructing a better world. And faith, it's hard working into the inner of our spirit. When we go to our spirit, the altar of our hearts, and we are ready, finally, to bring all the sacrifice that these unruled human passions cause it into our lives.
Excellent. Thank you very much for a great explanation. Thanks for your time. so yeah, so based on the book, Asas da Verdade, Wings of Freedom, how can I help people who don't believe that life's adversities are important for us to evolve and are not a punishment from God?
There's a very, very great way to do that. We live this into our lives. Because if someone doesn't want to listen, why you are going to explain? The person doesn't want to listen. But when we live this into our lives, when we believe and we try this change into our spirit, we're gonna show people and not explain through our deeds, through our living daily. So when we see these missionaries of humanity that comes for us and live the life with all the adversities and how we deal with their adversities, we teach people around us. And once there was a spirit that comes to us and he said like this: everyone that accomplish, I will think just in Portuguese, just one moment. Everyone that accomplish his duties becomes a missionary for the humanity. So if the person doesn't want to see that, we don't need to worry. We will live this into our lives, and we will teach ourselves, and we will teach all those who are around us through our modification and the renovation of our souls.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Alvaro. Thank you for such an interesting topic. Thank you for all your comments. Thanks, everyone. And for that who watched today's talk live, and also for those who have been following every week this series of talks from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. So next Saturday, we're going to have Marcelo Medeiros, who's also going to bring us at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, as always. Don't miss it. Marcelo Medeiros will be discussing the importance of silence. Very interesting topic. I have a question for you, Alvaro. So it's up to you. How inspired do you feel to say the final prayer, or would you prefer me to say the final prayer? I'm here for you as always.
It's up to you, my friend. If you want, I can try. Probably I will not get as much as...
Actually, I beg to differ. I'm pretty sure you're gonna do just fine.
Okay, so let's do it. So let's close our eyes and trying to thinking and elevate our thoughts to God and understand that the creators of heaven and earth, the one that rules the whole universe and takes care about all the stars all over the universe and all the planets and all the laws that govern us and rules the physical world and all the animals that are receiving the care of God, exactly like all the vegetables and all the kingdoms of our universe. And we try to elevate our thoughts and to understand that sometimes we can get paralyzed for the pain that we feel. Sometimes we can get paralyzed by the mistakes that we committed. Sometimes we can get paralyzed for our physical body. But what we ask God is the strength to renovate ourselves, to standing up for the purpose of our life. And this purpose is the spiritual purpose of spiritual growth, of looking to all the problems that are surrounding us in this day and trying to find what can I learn from the difficulty, from the pain, from the disease, from the disorder. And when I learned, and I started working for rehabilitation of the wrong things around the world, like a small spirit, like a small bee that works accomplishing what is necessary to do. And one by one, helping each and every one of us, understanding the charity and understanding the hard working. We will construct together a whole new humanity, a whole new era where we look one to the others, understanding that God loves each and every one of us, and to love God, it's necessary to love our neighbors, to love all the humanity, and through charity, to forgiving, we will learn the value of the Gospels, that side by side with love and reincarnation will be the way to live the kingdom of heaven into our lives today and for the whole humanity in the next days that will come, for the next centuries. So we thank God for all the strength that you had till now. And if it was not enough, we ask for more strength to continue the journey into this world, to our spiritual growth, and to renovating ourselves. So we thank you all for this opportunity in this morning.
Thank you, Alvaro. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice weekend.